Welcome to another VirtuWorks live session. My name is Gianni D'Alerta, and today I'll be your host as we discuss how to secure your business with Microsoft 365. Joining us today on my right is the CEO of VirtuWorks, Mr. Omar Armenteros, and on my left, our VP and Director of Sales, Mr. Michael Bumberg. If you have any questions, please make sure you use the Q&A feature of the Teams app, and we'll be addressing those questions towards the end of this presentation. So for the most part, businesses spend a lot of time and effort securing their on-site offices, right? From networks to firewalls to antivirus and whatnot. However, because of this pandemic, we have many employees, or majority of the employees, working remotely. And they're probably using their own computers or office computers in an insecure network at home, right? So that adds another level of threat to your company's data and security. So I have one question that I'd like to ask you. How confident are you in the security of your company's data? During this presentation, we'll discuss some of the common threats and how those threats have advanced. Omar is going to take care of talking about some of those things. After that, we're going to talk about different ways that Microsoft 365 and VirtuWorks are able to stop those threats. And then afterwards, we are going to, with Michael, he's going to address some of the frontline things you can use to defend against these threats using employees, right? He will also have 5 questions that will help you self-assess your current risk threat or your current threats and your risk assessment and answer that question.
Exactly.
Okay, so to get right into it, Omar, I've known you for more than 20 years. You've been in IT and technology for that amount of time or more, and you've seen the whole gamut of threats and how they've advanced. Why don't you give us kind of a threat landscape?
Yeah, no problem, Gianni. All right, so, we've been doing this for about 25 years, like Gianni said. Way back in the day, early on in the business, threats were always a thing. They were a lot different back then than they are now. So I'll start with talking about what we used to see and how it's kind of progressed throughout the years. Back when we started, the most common type of threat was a virus. A lot of people don't talk about viruses today, but viruses were the most common thing. Their intent usually was malicious, but it wasn't about collecting your information or your data or anything. It was more about just creating havoc. They would create a virus that would, delete your files or cause your computer not to boot up, or just things that would just piss you off, right? It wasn't anything that was going to shut you down or put you out of business. As time progressed and kind of the hackers and the people creating these programs evolved, they started to see a way of opportunity to monetize these threats, and started to create different versions of these viruses that had a specific intent at trying to collect your information. That's where the advent of this malware came. Malware is a type of threat where it actually could be bundled with software that you buy, or just download like something free like WinZip or whatever. So sometimes when you're installing softwares like that, you would see that it says, hey, do you want to install this toolbar in your Internet Explorer, or do you want to basically enjoy some other third-party software that's being bundled in with the product. And most times people want the product that they're downloading. They ignore the check boxes, and then in the end, what ends up happening is that your computer starts suffering from these type of infections where they're just collecting information about what websites you went to browse, maybe you capture keystrokes, or just kind of like what you were doing with your computer. From there, things continued to evolve because these guys didn't just want to collect your data; they wanted to do something with it, right? There was an intent that they had was to make money from the information that they were taking. So the next progressive thing that happened was the advent of ransomware, where these guys would start creating software that basically would come and encrypt your network, your files. They would make it make your files unusable, and then would ask you for some sort of ransom. That ransom, it could come in a bunch of different ways and forms, but most of the time they would ask for these ransoms in Bitcoins. And you would have to kind of arrange a payment with them and figure it out. And it was very disruptive because a lot of businesses didn't have the proper type of backup system in place or the ability to recover from a complete lockout. And as time went by, these attacks continued to evolve. And they've gotten more sophisticated, and the hackers have tried to make sure that they encrypt more, including your backups, and just trying to create a disaster where you have no choice than to engage with them, right?
It's really become an entire business.
It's like organized crime, right? And saying that, it really brings up the next evolution of threats. That came to be known.
How they get in there. Right?
How they get into actually attack you, right? Which is phishing, right? Phishing is when hackers basically go out, they collect email addresses or whatever, a bunch of ways of contacting you. Most of the time it's through email, and they'll send millions and millions of emails out, basically trying to bait you. In order to fill in a form or to give your username and password to an online form. It might look like an email that came from Microsoft that is asking you to reset your password, that it expired, or sometimes I've seen ones that are like, hey, your mailbox is too full. You have to go over here and delete messages, and in the process they ask you for your username and password.
Or even social networks like Facebook.
Yeah, we've seen some of these look like, hey, get a free pizza. They come in all types of shapes and forms. They're basically mass mailings, like form letters, mail merges, that these guys are grabbing information about your names and your addresses and other components of data they've collected over time, and being able to send out these emails in a way that, they feel common, but they're really not, so they're easy to detect if you really know how to look for them. Some training goes a long way at detecting what's real and what's not. Which we'll talk about more in this event. But for the most part, this is the most common way that we see people intruded. So they get an email, they click a link, they enter in a form. That form gets their credentials, sends it to a database, and then for the most part, most of these attacks continue in an automated, autonomous way, right? A person doesn't come in the background, grab your credentials. They might feed your credentials to a bot, and then that bot will go attack your Exchange Online mailbox and log in and send out 1,000 emails, basically with the intent of infecting more people, right? As time has gone by, this phishing technique has really become more effective because organizations are now very aware of the situation, and people are more weary of opening and clicking and filling in these forms. There's a lot of awareness that has gone on. Not as much as there should be, but in these days there's a lot more knowledge to it, right? But hackers need to continue making their money, right? And they want to still rob you, right? So with the fact that just blasting millions of emails starting to be less effective, these hackers decided to continue collecting more and more data and be more specific about their attacks. So after phishing, now we're seeing something called spear phishing, which basically is where attackers will, first of all, research their subject, their target, find out about them. Maybe they'll go to their website. A lot of people on their website, they have bios, about themselves. Hey, I'm a graduate of X college. I have a dog named Buster. I worked here 20 years.
And their titles.
Their titles and all that type of stuff. And how does this help the hackers? Well, first of all, right there, you gave away pretty much all the answers to your secret questions on most of your credit card websites and everything else. But on top of that, it really helps the hackers create an organizational chart of who to attack, right? Who's important, what's the chain of command, who makes decisions. And then most of the time, they'll hack somebody unrelated, like a vendor, or they'll hack an assistant or something like that, not directly the person they're trying to spearfish, and sit and wait, and wait for the perfect opportunity to inject something like, for instance, you might be in the process of making a large payment to a vendor. Say you owe somebody a bunch of money, you got to wire them a payment. The hacker might be inside your vendor's computer waiting to see when that payment is going to go down, and immediately in the process injecting an email back to you saying, hey, you know what, don't use the same bank account information that you always use, wire it over here. And a lot of people don't catch that and end up wiring money out, and then they lose a big sum of money and you can't get it back.
Their network may be secure, but their vendor may be someone that's already been affected, right?
Right. So again, in spear phishing, a lot of the times the best protection against these type of attacks really becomes, humans, right? Putting in manual processes before you send large wires is a real easy way of stopping this from happening. A lot of times, in the past, people were just trusting emails and approving wires, and they didn't have like, hey, pick up the phone, let me call my accounting person and say, hey, yeah, that wire's approved. That one step is one way that, kind of shuts down a lot of this going on. One threat that a lot of people don't really talk about all the time, but it's very important to add to the list of threats is internal employee threats. Employees are probably as threatening as external people, and clients, organizations, they don't realize that. And these threats come in different types of shapes, right? So we'll talk about a couple of them. First, shadow IT, right? Sometimes organizations will hire a tech-savvy employee, and that employee, with goodwill, wants to help and gets involved with technology. But in most cases, after a while of their involvement, they begin to kind of try to drive some of the technology that's going on, and they eliminate the official IT company's role in helping making those decisions. And sometimes, as IT, we find changes in networks and stuff that weren't implemented by us, but they were implemented by somebody else. Like to make an example, something that's happened a lot of times is, a client might need a Wi-Fi access point in a certain area of the office. We would have installed really nice secure access points across their whole office, and they might have a couple already, but there might be a blind spot on the Wi-Fi access. The employee will be like, hey, I'll go to Office Depot, I'll buy an access point, I'll plug it in, right? And they plug it in, and now that access point, it's not in our catalog of devices. We don't know about it. We haven't validated the settings. We don't know if it's secure, right? So for the most part, shadow IT is a bad thing. It's not a good thing. Even though some organizations think it's helped them save money and save time, long run, it does not help. Another thing that really doesn't help a lot is how employees use personal devices, and the organizations and the employees are both at fault at this, right? Because organizations, they don't want to spend the money on organization devices. They prefer to say, hey, you have a device, use it. But in those cases, most of the time, those devices are shared by multiple people in a family. They might not have the right antivirus. They definitely don't have the same corporate policies applied to them, like require a screensaver, lock your desktop if you're away from it for 15 minutes.
Having a password on it.
Having a password, it sounds crazy, but a lot of people's personal devices don't have passwords because people don't want to deal with passwords, especially cell phones. We find a lot of iPhones and Androids that aren't locked. Something that companies don't understand about that is that when you have an unlocked device, somebody could just walk up next to you with a Bluetooth and just connect to that device and extract data from it, right? So is your corporate information safe in that case? No, it's not, right? So you have to make sure that your employees are adhering to the same security principles that you as an organization want to adhere to. And last point about employee threats is one that I really love because it really pisses me off a lot, because people, we have this fight all the time with a lot of people, is password complacency, right? Password complacency is usually an executive problem, where the owners of the business or managers or people with influence don't want to change their password, right? They've been using the same password since 1980. When they first touched the computer or a device that required one. It comes in very, very, very giant, different types of things. It could be a very secure password that's 20 years old. It doesn't have to be a simple one.
It just hasn't changed.
It just hasn't changed, right? So people don't like to rememorize their password, and most of the time what we'll get from these, executives and managers is, well, could I just reset my password back to the same password I had before? And the first time they tell me that, I'll be like, okay, fine, I'll let it slide. But then when they do it to me every time that the password gets reset, you try not to say nothing. Hey, it's your stuff, right? The most that we could do as an organization is advise and tell people, hey, this is not a good idea. You should change your password. And it's a point that we're always constantly dealing with. So giving that's pretty much all the different threats that.
That's awesome. I mean, you gave us a good kind of landscape,
right, from
the common to how these things have advanced, right? And before we had one border that we had to protect in our office. Now that the employees are working from home, or even not that fact, but people are working remotely, just
right.
in general, in a general way.
The
right?
general big difference between the 6 months, and I wouldn't say 6 months ago, I would say 3 years ago, because the move that people have been making to work from home and work remote has been happening for years. The pandemic didn't create that. The pandemic accelerated that. It made it a requirement right away for pretty much everybody, but it was something that was already ongoing and happening in the background, and it was kind of informal, right? Everybody wanted to work from home or work freely. It's kind of like flex work, and from what we found at VirtuWorks, it's a kind of good way for people to work. People are happy when they're flexible, right? So it's how we do it here. But back to Gianni's point before about how networks used to be centralized. That is the really big difference between the past and the present, right? Where in the past, IT organizations and companies were able to protect their office space or their office locations by basically creating a big border, border wall, and
in one location.
In one location, and that was like the floodgate, right? Either you got in or out through that point. Everything that needed to be secured was behind it. And you didn't really have to worry about anything else. There wasn't anything going on outside of that, right? But
you've mentioned also the aspect of people VPNing into an office and working through there. But I mean, we're talking about open borders, right?
Right. So the real thing is that the tools that were built for the modern office 5 years ago no longer really apply to the current state of the world, right? Where people are just working from anywhere, they're working wherever they want to work from. There's no, it's not static anymore, right? Now we have to defend device for device, not 100 devices behind a firewall. So by saying that, the tools, and the products that we have to implement as an IT organization have completely changed, going into that,
So I mean, obviously, VirtuWorks has been fighting this battle for many years through the partnership with Microsoft, right? And Microsoft 365 has a bunch of solutions to defend both software and hardware type things, right? And so why don't we talk about some of those things and what VirtuWorks and Microsoft can do to help people prevent some of these attacks?
No problem. All right. So actually, going back to the fact that I just explained how systems are no longer centralized, right? The biggest core point of any secure network is identity, right? Identity is the central core cog of security, right? Because face it, right? Who are we protecting? We're protecting people. We don't really care about the devices. We care about the people and the information that they have, right? You always want to start at that identity and funnel everything else kind of to it, right? In the past, when offices were all in one place, most of the time people had something called a Microsoft domain controller that was installed on site, and that device would basically secure everybody's identity locally. One of its fundamental flaws, though, was that it wasn't built for the cloud world. It was built really for organizations that had control of all their sites, that could create secure VPNs between their organizations. But the advent of me taking my Surface laptop over to Starbucks and plugging it in and using the Wi-Fi, that really wasn't a thing when this stuff was developed. As time has gone by, we really have to rethink the identity process, and that's something that VirtuWorks has been doing for a while now, for the past 2 years. And I guess I'll reverse myself a little bit back, right? VirtuWorks, started building a cloud with its own identity framework, and we started doing that many years ago, right? And as time's gone by, we've slowly started, eliminating all these on-prem Active Directory controllers that used to exist at all our clients, and moving them into an integrated, singular, cloud-based identity system, right? So at this point, maybe 50% of VirtuWorks customer devices are now joined into something called Microsoft Azure Active Directory, right? So what is Microsoft Azure Active Directory? It's a cloud-based identity platform. It's a way for organizations to create all their user accounts in a cloud, and then basically using the latest versions of Windows 10 Pro, you're able to join that device into the Microsoft cloud the same way you used to be able to do it with the local on-prem Active Directory. What does this do for you? Well, first of all, it completely untethers the devices from the locations, right?
And from the person as well. Technically.
Kind of, yes, but it untethers the device from the location, right? So a device could belong to multiple people. But you could take a device and move it around, and now your identity, your user and password that you log into that device is no longer tethered to your office, right? Be it that laptop is at Starbucks or it's at your house or wherever it's at. You plug it in, you get Wi-Fi signal. As long as you can reach the Microsoft cloud, your computer is able to authenticate itself on the identity network. All right, so beyond the identity network, which is, like I said, it's the core, it's the beginning, right? And you want to get all your devices into this identity framework. Microsoft extends the security on these free capabilities, with a set of add-ons that you could buy for different fees, right? And that's what Microsoft 365 is a bundle of the core Microsoft products like Exchange Online, Teams, SharePoint,
Office,
whatever.
all the Office apps.
But it's extended to also include some other bundles of software that make your devices more secure in this disconnected, untethered world, right? So I'm going to go over each one of these different parts of the bundle now to basically explain what each one does, so you guys can understand. Inside of, they call it enterprise security, mobility and security, right? It's made up of multiple products. The first product is Azure Active Directory Premium P1. This Azure Active Directory Premium P1 extends the Microsoft identity with about 6 or 7 different add-on features, which make your device, make your user experience more secure. The first one is multi-form factor authentication. Most of you guys are used to multi-form factor, maybe interacting with your bank. Google has it. You've seen it online, right? Facebook. Basically, it's the ability for you to register your cell phone or an email and be challenged when you log in, right? So you log in, you put your username and password. It sends you an approval to your phone on an app. You accept it. You're confirming.
It's another layer.
It's another layer.
Code and you put your code.
Exactly. So it's pretty straightforward. By default, the basic identity platform does not provide MFA. The second thing that the Premium P1 adds is something called single sign-on. With the free one, you're able to add up to 10 external sites, but it's kind of limited, right? It doesn't allow you to use all the different SSO features. So with the Premium P1, it actually allows you to have unlimited, they're called federated sites. And basically, you can, say you're using an outside site, say you're an accountant and you're using Thomson and Reuters, or you're a property management company and you're using something like Real Pages, right?
Or even Salesforce.
Salesforce is another example. QuickBooks Online. You're able to connect your Microsoft credentials to those external sites and use the same credentials to log in. What benefit does this have? Well, first of all, as an IT organization, you don't now have to go out and go to all these different websites to find out what happened with logins, what the history is, who logged in when and how many times, and where they were and all that stuff.
Stop a login.
The SSO now will actually keep track of all that stuff in one place inside of the Microsoft Cloud. The other benefit of it is that if you cut the user off, it'll automatically cut them off from all these websites in one shot. You don't have to go and remember to go disconnect them from every location. The next feature that Premium P1 adds, and it's kind of redundant to some of the features that VirtuWorks provides in its platform, is self-service password maintenance, right? The ability for users to have password expirations, reset their passwords on their own. Again, like I said, VirtuWorks has a similar offering that we provide for free to all our customers, right? So just for being our customer, we're going to give you our password self-service system.
So there's not an employee can say, I forgot, I can't get into my account. They can easily do that.
We automatically apply policies now, that to new customers and that their passwords expire after 120 days. We send emails, 15 days in advance to basically offer people, the ability to change their password. And when it expires, they can't log in, right? And, this is a systematic password reset system, which helps the password complacency problem, right? And but then again, sometimes people make us put in never expire my password, right? Which
or extend that.
So this doesn't help you when you have that type of
We'll address that towards the
right,
end.
exactly. All right. Another feature of Premium P1 is that Microsoft applies machine learning threat analysis to all the logins and all the information that they're kind of parsing on logins, right? They call this risky users. Inside of the Microsoft portal, you're able to log in and actually get a list of who has risky logins and what could be a risky login. For instance, I might have logged in 5 minutes ago on my device here in Miami, and then at the same time, Microsoft detected somebody connecting to something else in my organization from Russia, right? Well, how can I be in two places at once? It's a good question, right? So Microsoft flags the user, it puts it in a threat state, and as an IT organization, we're able to go back, review this on an ongoing basis, determine if there's a real threat, if it was something, that was intended, right? And going over the fact that people can connect from anywhere, another feature of Premium P1, which is a very nice one, is called Conditional Access. Conditional Access basically allows you to apply login restriction based on a device or a user's location, their device compliance. And when I say device compliance, I mean you as an organization, you could set policies like, hey, do they have a 6-digit password? Or is their screensaver configured to turn on after 15 minutes? Or do they have the latest version of Windows 10, or they're using 1.5 versions behind? With Conditional Access, you're able to set these policies, and then a tool called Microsoft Intune, which I'm talking about next, actually is able to check the policies and mark the device as compliant or not. If the device is not compliant, you can shut it out, and the person can log in. So this is even beyond two-form MFA. It's beyond username and password.
It's
a proactive way to block devices when they have threat capabilities, right? If, for instance, another thing that you could do, hey, if you're using an iPhone and the iPhone is jailbroken, right? Which is huge, right? Because a jailbroken phone is, full of hacking stuff, right? It could easily be compromised because it's not locked down from Apple. You can block jailbroken devices, right? So conditional access is very powerful.
Protects people from themselves.
Yes. And then going into that, Intune, which is the device management, right? It's how basically you review, monitor, and apply policies to devices that are either personal or commercial, right? So all the devices, cell phones, Android devices, Apple devices, iPads, desktop computers, when they're all joined into device management, it basically lets you lock out devices, it lets you check compliance, and it also lets you, basically see a whole scope of everybody's devices and control it in a different way. So you could basically say through conditional access and device management, say, don't let anybody connect to our data unless it's a corporately sanctioned and approved device. Then the next thing, those are all the features that come with Premium P1, and Intune is a separate part of the bundle. Another part of the bundle that comes with EMS and Microsoft 365 is something called Azure Information Protection. Azure Information Protection is document classification, labeling, and encryption. Basically, what this allows a company to do is to provide encryption and protection to documents at a user-by-user level, right? So I could get a document and lock it and encrypt it and say that only us three are able to access it. And then at any time, once I send this document out, even if I sent it out to 10 people, only us would be able to see it. And then at any point in time, I could say, hey, Gianni, you're not allowed to see it anymore, even though you've had the document for a month, and the document gets destroyed, right? It doesn't delete or anything, but it's unopenable. It's not, because it requires access to a shared
that identity platform.
Key to the identity platform. When the identity platform says, hey, he doesn't have access anymore, it shuts down your access to the document. The other benefit of AIP, sending documents through AIP, is that you're also able to track how many times it was open, from what countries they were open from, IP addresses that they were open from. So it gives you a really, really tight control over your document access.
And who can view it.
And if you're also in a specialized industry, encryption is important, right? A lot of companies now are required to encrypt their documents, right? This doesn't only work also with email, though. You could also encrypt folders and documents that are folders and protect it from your internal staff.
A lot of people are used to some of these things, but this is another level because the actual document itself can be controlled remotely too. An IT director can stop access, the individual can stop access, whatnot.
The other benefit of document labeling as well is that document labeling, the labels themselves is something that lives across the entire Microsoft cloud, right? So you could say things like, hey, if the document is confidential, somebody's sending a confidential document out, place it on hold, it needs to be approved. Other things that are possible in EMS is also like writing rules to automatically change the classification of a document based on the contents, right? So through the machine learning, you could say, hey, if this document has social security numbers in it, or it has a driver's license inside of it, or customer data in it. Yep. You could automatically raise the label to confidential. Microsoft will detect it, and you could also flag it to be reviewed by administrator before it actually gets mailed out. So it's a very powerful add-on to documents, and it gives you a lot of extra capabilities, making sure that you don't lose your data, right? Because data loss, DLP, data loss is not just about a hacker coming in and taking your data. Your employees as well could send out confidential information that they don't realize is confidential, and when it goes out, it's too late, right? Somebody can send your whole client list over to a marketing company and not realize they're giving the client list that you've had for 20 years.
The government is very susceptible to some of these things as well.
Yes. All right, so the next thing that comes part of EMS, I'm sorry if this is getting long, but there's a lot of parts to EMS.
We're almost done with the last little pieces.
Right. So another part of EMS is Windows Autopilot, right? Which it is not actually part of EMS. It's part of the Microsoft 365 line, and it's an IT component for IT organizations. Basically, what it allows you to do is it allows you to create something called a provisioning template. And you can have multiple provisioning templates based on the different roles that employees have. So your IT could create a provisioning template that kind of spells out all the different things that the IT wants to configure on a device, right? So say you get a new purchasing agent or a new salesperson that's joining your organization, right? You could go off to the internet, buy a laptop right off the internet, ship it to that person. That person opens it up. When that computer gets turned on for the first time, it goes through a process called the open box experience from Microsoft. And it's going to ask the user, hey, do you have a corporate email address or do you have personal, right? When you answer corporate and you put in your corporate credentials, it'll actually check Microsoft for Windows Autopilot, see if there's a related provisioning template to your username, and apply that provisioning template. And that provisioning template could include things like Wi-Fi passwords and networks and printers or specialized applications that you need, like if you need WinZip or you need an estimating program or you need access to your RDP icons. The provisioning
or special network folders and documents that are specific to that department.
So it's very powerful, and it's meant to avoid IT touch points on provisioning, which you might not think that that's a security problem, but as an IT organization, we want to have our hands and proliferate the least amount of passwords through people as possible, right? We don't want to go into your computer and know your password, and we don't want to write it down. We want to be zero touch, right? The more zero touch we are, the more secure the experience is for the end user, right? Because basically we're kind of automating everything, and it creates consistency in practice, right? All right, so moving on from there. Another capability of the security platform is something called Cloud App Security. And Cloud App Security is basically just a web console that collects information about what's going on the computer. It's not like a Big Brother thing. It's not collecting what websites you're going to or anything like that. Right. It's just looking for threat information, and it correlates and provides a dashboard for IT to be able to go through and look at what are the different threats that have been picked up inside of your devices, right? So it's informational. It gives you actionable items to take care of. It helps IT build a better network. All right, and last but not least, the Office Security and Compliance Center, which comes with Office 365 and with all these other products. What it is, it's Microsoft. Since it's one cloud, they've kind of they decided that all their applications and all their programs are going to send their logging information and all their audits into one centralized place to make it easy for the companies to do e-discovery. To do, go back and see conversations in Teams. It's one place where all the audits and record keeping of events that have happened to your users is stored, and it allows you to go back and search. The other thing is it provides compliance ratings, right? So if you see on the screen right now, there's a security score, and it's kind of like a credit rating, right? As a company, you want to have the highest security score as possible, right?
Or make improvements to make that better.
Right, exactly. So it gives a gaugeable number based on an assortment of information that Microsoft has collected, and doing different things gives you more points, right? So the more you drive and go towards the trying to improve and comply with all the different items that Microsoft is saying is a problem, the higher your security score is going to be. And like I said, it's like a credit score, right? You want to have 1,000 out of 1,000, right? And
as close to it, and make improvements to make that number go up. So, yes. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, you've kind of given us a big view of all the solutions Microsoft has to protect people systematically, autonomously, allowing IT to do their job, right? And basically defend all the borders, yes. Right? But you've kind of touched on this a couple of times. Technology is not just, it's not enough, right?
It's not enough.
We need a little bit more, right? So
most of the time, and I'll go back into a conversation I have had 1,000 times with customers is, they'll call me up and they'll send me one question. Hey, is my information secure? Are we good? Are we secure? Is everything taken care of? And counterproductive to myself, my answer is always no, your data is not protected, your data is not secure, because I want everybody.
There's always something more to do.
There's always something more to do. It's never ending, right? As much as you want to think that there's a technology solution that you can just click a button and magic and everything is covered, the real problem is that it really requires a lot of effort from the humans that are involved as well, because, we call it the human firewall, right? The human firewall is half the protection. So if you're not enforcing a secure culture inside of your organization, you could have the best technology and still get hacked all the time. And it's not the IT person's fault because the IT person could implement all kinds of technology. But if people don't use it or understand how it works, then it really doesn't make. It's
not just the software or the IT person. There's this frontline thing. You've mentioned this whole human firewall. You're working with VirtuWorks clients directly. You're seeing the front line. Absolutely. So why don't you kind of give us an idea what companies can do? I mean, we have things that we can do to help them, but what can they do to stop that front line from being breached, basically?
Sure. Thanks, Gianni. I think Omar said it best, right? The human firewall. There's only so much technology really can do, and Microsoft 365 gives you a tremendous amount there from a technology standpoint. But the bottom line is, it's us. It's the people that have to make sure that we understand the security, we understand the risks that we can, control. So, the first thing, obviously, within any company is to try and figure out what is, a risk assessment, right? Is my company a risk? Are my people doing the right thing? Are they doing the wrong thing? Huge question. And if you ask people, without doing any type of assessment, do
Everybody-
they understand it? They're like, oh yeah, of course, we know everything.
Right,
Well,
but our cases, most of the time when we do these first assessments, we have failure rates of 60-70%.
unbelievable failure rates, unbelievable.
People actually doing what they said that they knew how to do, right? So
People even with some of the programs that we have and that we can set up, we do fake phishing tests, right? And these tests actually are asking people to put in their email and password, and people do it.
Right.
And where everyone thinks they're secure, they're really not, because as Omar mentioned, right, when customers ask him, am I secure? And his answer is no, there's your reason.
So the software will send things to kind of assess employees by acting like a hacker.
Correct.
And then it'll tag them as this person needs some training and whatnot.
So what we do, the programs that we have that we can implement is literally testing their employees, finding out, getting a baseline. From that baseline, then creating a mitigation plan. The mitigation plan, includes a training. If they fail the phishing test, they'll be directed to a training that they need to take. And then the other piece of that is not a one-time thing, right? We can't do this just once. It's ongoing. Right. And we've talked about this, Omar, we've talked about
threats
this.
Change, they get more sophisticated, and it's kind of like continuous education, right? We have to learn about new threats. So do the employees, right? The employees have to be aware of what's new, what's going on there. What are the tricks that the hackers are attempting to get through them by? Because if they don't know, then we're kind of fighting a war. That we have no soldiers.
So our goal, really is to create a company culture, and we want to do it by reducing risk and creating a security culture. Is probably a better way of putting it, right? It's creating a security culture within the organization so they can limit the risk from the human element and create a stronger human firewall than they have.
Correct. And constantly testing and drilling them, just like in war, use the word war or a fire drill, you have to reinforce what's being educated.
It has to be ongoing. Remember,
to change
you're
the culture.
onboarding and offboarding employees all the time, so it has to continue over and over to create that culture.
That's fantastic. So thank you for sharing all that information. I think it's really important for people watching this to realize it's not just the technology, it's the people, and that VirtuWorks has the means to do this. So do we have any questions from our Q&A? Nope, we don't have any questions. Well, again, thank you for joining us. I think Michael wants to recap some of the question we asked at the beginning, right?
Yeah. So remember at the beginning, we said that we would ask 5 questions that you can ask yourself to assess the security of your company's data. So first, do you think your antivirus is able to stop advanced threats? How confident are you in your employees' ability to spot phishing attempts? Do you commonly use email to send sensitive and confidential information? Here's a very important one. Do you have a password policy in place that is systematically enforced? And do you have control of your company's information on your employees' personal devices? So if you can't answer yes to these questions or are unsure of the answers, it might be a really good time to review and take a deeper dive into your IT infrastructure needs. If there's anything that we can help you with, please, there's a number on the screen right there. We can schedule a meeting to review your security risks. No matter how simple or complex your infrastructure is, we can help you come up with solutions.
And again, and thank you for joining us. This video and the recording, we'll be posting it on our different social media channels so you can review some of this information. And again, if you have questions, if you have any doubt of that first question or any of the questions that we addressed here today, make sure you reach out so we can help you create that assessment. Again, thank you for joining us.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thank you.